Hey, welcome to another episode of The Way I See It. Thank you all for watching. I have 58 subscribers as of the recording right now. I always end up recording and then they come out like a week or more later, and I always have a few more subscribers, so that's good. If you like my videos, if you've watched another one before and you want to continue watching, click the subscribe button. It's like right here in the corner, and there's a notification bell down below. If you click that, then every time a new video comes out, you get a notification, like, you know, The Way I See It, or whatever. I guess I'm called The Way I See It. I don't know if it's called Rachel Odell or The Way I See It. Just uploaded a new video on YouTube. You know, it'll either be an email or a text, or you know, maybe some sort of banner on your computer, whatever kind of settings you have YouTube set up to do. So today, I want to talk about, ooh, hear that thunder? I want to talk about grumbling and muttering and murmuring, and then I kind of want to pivot to joy and the joy that we're supposed to experience. I don't want to just leave it with you shouldn't be grumbling and complaining and then like end it right there. I want to talk about joy and kind of what I see as the proper joyous outlook. For this one, I've got my handy dandy notebook here again with my notes. What I call my evangelist notebook, I guess. I can preach. And then I've also got my Bible. I have a lot of scriptures to read in this one. So the Bible has a lot to say on grumbling and complaining, murmuring, muttering, uses a lot of words for it. And the main takeaway, you'll be like, well, I can just watch to this point in the video and then stop because I know what you're going to say. The main takeaway is I want to say that it is highly offensive to God, and He will judge it harshly. If you consider yourself a Christian and you routinely grumble and complain, you need to think about your actual Christianity. And I don't mean just, there's verses I'm going to read that talk about grumbling and complaining against one another, and God tells us not to do that, more because we need to be unified as Christians in love. And I've done a video before about unity in the body, and I'll put a card right here for that. But the kind of muttering and grumbling that God really judges harshly is the kind that is done against Him. Now, most of us as Christians don't openly, you know, grumble or complain against God. Although there was this one time, this happened more than once. I'm a very dramatic person. And I also I'm a perfectionist, and I hate to make mistakes. I hate to let people down. One time, this is before we had kids or anything. So it's like maybe 12, 13, who knows, several years ago. My husband was in a play, and he would like to take cookies, at least, you know, one night of the show to his castmates. If you've ever been in a show with my husband, he probably brought some sort of treat for the cast. Or, you know, we used to invite folks over to our house if he was doing a show up the road at the local theater. But one time he was doing a show, and he wanted, I guess for opening night or maybe sometime in the opening weekend for us, he wanted to take cookies for the castmates. And he asked me to make these cookies, and he was going to come by and get them and take them to the show. And we had a gas oven, and it just cooked faster than ovens did on like instructions for things. So I cooked these just Pillsbury cookies, burned that whole batch. Oh, I was so mad. I dumped them in the garbage. I was like, ah! Cooked another batch, set it for a lower time, burned them again, set off the smoke alarm, dumped them in the trash, opened up the doors, went out onto the deck and screamed, "Why, God? Why?" And I cried. And I literally did this, y'all. I was by myself, but I was so angry. And I cried, and I called him up, and he was busy. I left him a voicemail. I'm like, "You're not going to be able to take any cookies because I just burned both batches of cookies. I'm so angry." And I hung up. And then like 45 minutes later, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to try this one more time. I think I can do it. So I called him up again, left another voicemail. I was like, disregard the previous voicemail because I'm going to do it. I'm going to try again. Went got more cookies at the store. I had to go to the store to get more cookies. Came back, set several minutes lower. I mean, it was one of those where it said like bake for 14 minutes, and the first time I did it for 14 and they burned, and the next time I did it for 13 and they burned. So this time I did it for just like 10. They were perfect, and I was so happy. So I cooked the whole, the second batch and put them, and he took them that night. And I was just, and that's a funny story to tell, but in that moment I was so angry, and I was angry at God. And I wasn't seriously angry in a very serious like lifestyle stance of being angry at God, but that was my outburst, And it's easy, I think, for Christians today to look at a lot of dysfunction around us in the world, no matter who you think is causing the dysfunction, It's easy to just look around and be like, God, why is this happening? I don't know if it's healthy or not. In the book of Job, you certainly see him crying out to God, and then God basically, rather than God coddling him and saying, it's okay, don't worry, I still love you, let me explain everything, God says, you know what, sit yourself down. Let me ask you something. And he basically just reads Job the riot act after Job has already suffered a whole lot and lost a whole lot of people he loved. And God still basically says, look, who are you to question me? I'm God. I'm God of the universe. I made you and I made everything else in the universe. So, get over it. But I think seeing Job cry out can give us permission to cry out. There's certain psalms that we can read where, the psalmist is crying out. And sometimes at the end of the psalm, it'll turn a corner and say, but I know that, God is looking out for me and things are going to get better and I'm going to rejoice in God. But some just end depressed. So we have to think, like, what is the condition of your heart when you are complaining or crying out to God? Are you still turning to Him in love to seek answers, to seek comfort, to seek guidance? Are you trusting in His sovereignty, or are you angry at Him? Because when we see, and I've quoted this part in Revelation before, and I'm going to put it scrolling along the bottom here, when God is pouring out His wrath on people that are not His flock, the kind of people who are unrepentant, those people, they don't in that moment suddenly say, oh, I was wrong, have mercy. They shake their fist at Him. They grumble and complain, and they just continue to grumble and complain. So I'm going to read a few important verses. This first one comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And in verses 9 through 11, Paul writes to the Corinthians, we should not test Christ as some of them did, and they were killed by snakes, and do not grumble as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel. These things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the culmination of the ages has come. This is part of this whole little section, starting in verse 1 of chapter 10, and this section kind of ends right at verse 13, and the whole previous 11 verses, starting in verse 1 up to where I just now read in 11, are talking about the people of Israel in the wilderness. So these are all reference to the Israelites in the wilderness. Verse 13 and 14 are popular, and we've heard them a lot of times, but not really in this context, and we have to kind of understand this context. So when it gets to 13, and this is famous, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will provide a way out so that you can endure it. Therefore, my dear friends, flee from idolatry. That is referring back, that's not just referring to temptations in general. Like, we always use that to just refer to, like, oh, if you're being sexually tempted, or if you're being tempted to go out and do things with friends that you shouldn't be doing, God will not make you be tempted. No, it's not just talk. I mean, sure, you can apply it to that. But if you look back, it's talking about all these things that the Israelites did. They had all these opportunities in the wilderness to not be tempted or tried beyond what they could bear, and they just failed. And because they failed, all these calamities came upon them. And when they grumbled against the Lord, he wasn't happy about it. That's like the reason the first generation of them died in the wilderness and did not get to go into the promised land. It was because they grumbled against him. So grumbling is a serious issue. I'm going to go back and read those sections in the book of Numbers. Starting in Numbers 14, verse 26. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "How long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very thing I heard you say. In this wilderness your bodies will fall, every one of you 20 years old or more, who was counted in the census and who has grumbled against me. Not one of you will enter the land I swore to with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb son of Jephunneh and Joshua son of Nun. As for your children that you said would be taken as plunder, I will bring them in to enjoy the land you have rejected. But as for you, your bodies will fall in this wilderness." Psalm 106 makes reference back to that same story. In verses 24 through 27, "Then they despised the pleasant land. They did not believe his promise. They grumbled in their tents and did not obey the Lord. So he swore to them with uplifted hand that he would make them fall in the wilderness, make their descendants fall among the nations, and scatter them throughout the lands." Right there in verse 24, where it says they despised the promised land, that doesn't mean they were like, I don't even want to go there anyway. Not the kind of despising we use when we typically say despise. It also can mean like to think that something has no value. It means they just did not look with value at what was ahead of them. In the New Testament, I'm going to jump ahead to 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 9. "Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling." That's a hard one for me because you may be pretty good at offering hospitality. I think I usually am. But I tell you, when someone wants me to offer hospitality and I didn't think of it first, it's real easy for my first thought in my mind to be, I gotta change my schedule, or I was about to do such and such and now they want me to do such and such instead. You know, eye roll. God hates it. God despises it, and he has a right to despise what he wants to despise because he makes the rules. So I'm talking to myself here. I need to change my own attitude in certain ways like that. Going back into Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, this is a pretty popular verse. "Do not let any unwholesome talk or corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." We usually look at that kind of verse as talking about not saying bad words, don't make coarse jokes. I mean, there's another verse Paul wrote about coarse joking, you know. We look at unwholesome talk, well, don't gossip. Most definitely don't gossip. But the thing is, the word there, unwholesome or corrupting, I heard someone refer to it once as like fish mouth. The problem is, that still doesn't even do it justice. It's not talking about just language that maybe gives off a bad odor to God's senses, or is just unattractive to the general listening public. If it's corrupting, imagine someone who has a skin disease. You don't want to touch that skin disease because it could travel to your skin and infect you. That person has something in them that is corrupting. It is corrupting them, and if you touch it, it's going to corrupt you. Of course, Jesus touched those people and healed them. But that's what it's talking about. Your words in that case are not just words that are unattractive or bring others down. They're words that cause corruption in those who listen. So it's not explicitly grumbling or complaining, but I would definitely say grumbling and complaining are part of what is considered corrupting talk. And then James 5:9 will be my final verse on grumbling. "Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door." So we see that it is important to God that we not judge, that we not corrupt others with our speak, and that we do not grumble against each other, and especially not against him. So we really have to think when we're when we're getting upset or aggravated with things right now, I feel like sometimes you just got to unplug from social media and from the news and just look at the life around you and just enjoy the fact that the weather is pleasant, or your kids are beautiful and happy, or you have pets that are adorable and their life is so simple and their happiness revolves around you. There's so many things to be grateful for. I think we need to just be very careful that we don't allow our outlooks on life to become so troubled and so downtrodden that we become just fountains of grumbling and complaining. There's a quote I want to end this section on before I turn to joy by C.S. Lewis. I love C.S. Lewis. He says, "Hell begins with a grumbling mood, always complaining, always blaming others, but you are still distinct from it. You may even criticize it in yourself and wish you could stop it, but there may come a day when you can no longer. Then there will be no you left to criticize the mood or even to enjoy it, but just the grumble itself, going on forever like a machine. It is not a question of God sending us to hell. In each of us there is something growing which will be hell unless it is nipped in the bud." Now I want to turn to joy. One of the things I feel like in our society right now is there's a lack of true suffering. I know you're saying, what are you talking about, Rachel? What is 2020 if not just a year of suffering? I mean, we've had the pandemic, we lost Kobe, we lost Chadwick Boseman, we've got the Antifa riots, and we've got the Black Lives Matter protests, and we've got police brutality. What are you talking about suffering? The fact is, very few people have themselves actually suffered, unless they put themselves in harm's way because they feel like it's their duty to stand by someone who is suffering. But even part of the complaining and the rioting that's going on, or not even, the rioting is bad, but the protesting, there's very little nuance to what's legitimately worth protesting and what is just people acting on the grumble. And a reason I say that there's not enough suffering, there is plenty of suffering in the world to go around, and some individuals suffer a lot. But our society as a whole has had it really good for a really long time. I mean, if you just go back 100 years, when people fought in some seriously deadly wars, and people were dying of diseases like they're not dying now, at least in America. We don't die like we used to. I mean, half the kids wouldn't make it age 5 or whatever. Maybe it wasn't that bad, but it was a pretty high percentage of kids that wouldn't even make it to age 5 because they just didn't have the medications and the vaccinations and all that we have today. They didn't have healthy food, or they didn't have proper sanitation. So our lives, especially in the last 40 years, have been so free of real legitimate suffering. Even when we see racism and things that need to be addressed in our society, anyone with an objective view of history can say it's not nearly as bad as it was in the 60s. But because of that, and because our education system has churned out Marxist ideology for the last 20 years, where everybody seems to think that you're either oppressed or an oppressor, that there is no in between, we live in just a grievance society. In the C.S. Lewis quote, it's talking about just the grumble, someone just grumbling all the time. Anyone who uses the word microaggression, I want to say, you know what? You're just a grumbler. You're a grumbler. So I feel like people who've suffered for real are the kind of folks who are a lot of times the most joyful, because they're the most appreciative of all the blessings and all the good things. I love listening to or reading things by Joni Tada, and I'll maybe put a video link right here to something of hers on YouTube. She was a young, healthy, athletic woman in age of 18, broke her neck in a swimming pool accident. I think she dove where it was too shallow or something. Became a quadriplegic. She lives in extreme pain every day of her life, and it's been over 50 years now that she has been living as a quadriplegic. And if you're a quadriplegic, it's not just that you can't move your arms and legs. you're way more susceptible to all kinds of illnesses all the time. But yet she's one of the most joyful, pleasant people. Even in her suffering, she praises God because she sees more of his goodness. It's like when Paul said that Jesus told him, my grace is sufficient for you. In your weakness, you are strong, because Jesus comes through. You learn to rely on him when you're suffering. You learn to find joy in him because you can't find it in yourself or your circumstances. When I read The Hiding Place by Corrie Ten Boom, I was just amazed at her attitude and the attitude of her sister in situations where, like, they would lay on these straw pallets in the concentration camp and they were crawling with lice and fleas, and her sister rejoiced. And you find out later that they're allowed certain freedoms in their barracks because the guards don't even want to come in there because of those fleas and that lice. And then they're like, oh, that's the blessing. That's why it was a blessing that we had the lice and the fleas, because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have been able to conduct these little church services and prayer meetings. So because of their suffering, they're so joyful. They can find such a joy that common people today just, golly, we can't. It's just so hard for us to. I get so angry when someone cuts me off in traffic. Hashtag first world problems. So let me read a few verses on joy. Philippians is a book that talks quite a bit about this kind of concept. Joy, joyous living. Paul has a lot of praise for the Philippian church. In chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, it says, do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure. Get that. If you can do things without grumbling or arguing, you may become blameless and pure. Children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. And that's in quotes because that's actually a quote. Deuteronomy 32:5. Then you will shine among them like the stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. Then over in the same book, in chapter 4, he says, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Anybody learn that song in church? Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord. Okay, hold on, keep going. Now it's in your head. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, or the shalom, as that word is actually, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. So in that section, we usually read some of these verses as just individual verses. These are the kind of verses that get just thrown out as like pep talk verses because they're easy, they're short, they're easy for little kids to memorize. But when you see there in verse 8 where he's saying whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, and he goes through that list and says, think on these things. Remember what that comes after. That comes after the part about don't be anxious. Let all your needs be made known to God. And that comes right after the part about rejoice in the Lord always. So how do you do that first thing? How do you rejoice in the Lord? Well, you do it by letting all your requests be made known to God and thinking about what is true and pure and lovely and right. What are you focused on? What are you thinking about in life? Again, you might need to turn off the social media or the news. I'm at least trying to do that on Sundays, and I'm not good. I'm just going to go ahead and be honest here. It's an addiction. I'm trying to stay off on Sundays, but that's pray for me right there, okay, everybody? Set yourself a goal and pray and try your best, and also pray for me to be able to do that. Because your children want to talk to you and play with you, or if you don't have children and you have sisters or brothers or nieces and nephews or your parents, and there's just things to be done and books to be read and life to be enjoyed, and the world is not going to burn down in one day because you didn't see the headline on Fox News or CNN that day. Again, I get it. And then I'm going to stay in that chapter, verses 11 through 13. Paul says, I'll just keep going because I just ended in verse 9. I'll just read 10. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Let's not use that verse anymore for I can win this football game through him who gives me strength. Or, I can ace this test through him who gives me strength. That's about contentment. That verse is about being content in any situation, having that inner joy and peace. The final verse is Romans 8:28, where it says, God works all things together for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. That doesn't mean that everything that happens is good. We can see plenty of examples in the Bible and in our own lives and around us of things that are not good. But God works everything for good, for his glory and our good. I'm going to end with the first question of the Westminster Shorter Catechism. It is, what is the chief end of man? The answer is, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. That's what your purpose in life is. That's why God made you. Are you glorifying God? And are you enjoying him? Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and you can like this video, you can comment. Remember, anybody who comments, I almost always will respond. So let me know what you think. Thank you so much. I'll see you later.